All right, Bigfoot Society. I've got the privilege of talking to Mr. Ryan Tremblay. He's a gentleman that I've been meaning to talk to for a while, but I'm so glad that he's on the show today. How's it going, Ryan?
It's going really well, man. It's been a busy week, but I am still functioning at full operations.
Awesome. And to let the listeners know, you are a researcher and also an artist, which is a very cool combination.
Oh, very much. I get to combine cryptids with my art and make some really cool stuff.
Oh, that's fantastic. And let's chat about, so how did you get into cryptids? What's your origin story when it comes to being involved in and researching all the different cryptids?
I grew up as a monster kid. My dad was a big monster fan, so he introduced me to universal monsters, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Wolfman, Frankenstein, and that became a staple. Every single day I was watching a different monster movie, and of course I'm a huge Godzilla and Gamera fan, no pun intended. So monsters are part of my everyday life. But when I was 7, my dad sat me down to watch the Patterson-Gimlin film, and I think with a lot of enthusiasts, that was really the diving board for us. That's what really got us into it. So we dove into this subject, and it took off from there.
Oh, that's awesome. Was that on like an In Search of or anything like that you remember? Or?
Yeah, it was with Leonard Nimoy. Remember the show that Leonard Nimoy had?
Oh, absolutely. That was
same. So I was introduced to that film with Leonard Nimoy's voice, and I was just hooked. That was it. The minute I watched that, I was like, oh my goodness, there's something in the woods. I'm going to find it.
That's awesome. We had a very similar experience for sure. I remember seeing that in the same exact show and then being like looking around and being like, why isn't everyone else freaking out about this?
Yeah, I couldn't figure it out. Young Ryan was sitting here going, how come everybody's sitting in the living room and not going out in the woods looking for Patty? What's going on here? So my dad told me, study, research, and get out in those woods and look.
Oh, exactly. We had talked about your home base of research, but have you always been in the southwest of the U.S.?
No, actually, I grew up in Massachusetts.
Oh,
so I was surrounded by woods everywhere. As a young boy that was into monsters like this, there was plenty of trees and everything for me to climb and a lot of wilderness to go and explore. And at that young age, every noise was a Bigfoot. I'd hear a branch fall and I was like, oh, there's Bigfoot.
What part of Mass did you grow up in?
I lived in Southbridge, I lived in Charlton, and for a brief time, I lived in Worcester.
Okay. Cool. So you were kind of on the eastern side of the state.
Correct.
All right. Very cool. Yeah, I grew up in the western Mass over near Northfield.
I've been there.
Okay. Yeah, Franklin County. And we got some, you go out in the woods out there. And you were definitely growing up in a very interesting state for Bigfoot. I wasn't into it when I was growing up to the point where I was going out in the woods yet. That came later. But definitely Western Mass. And that is a cool connection that we have.
Yeah, when I was 12, my dad actually took me to Dover, Mass because of the Dover Demon.
Oh,
I actually got to see the wall where they had sighted the Dover Demon originally. He just provoked my love for cryptids all he could.
That is really cool. Did you ever go up to America's Stonehenge up in New Hampshire?
I didn't. No, I didn't make it that far, but someday it's on my bucket list.
You definitely check it out. It's a weird stones lined up with the equinoxes and all this weird stuff. It's very interesting. But Ryan, a few people started dropping your name in different messages after I started talking about, to give people a little bit of backstory, credit where credit is due, of course, Cryptids of the Corn podcast released a episode about hyenas and how they are seen around different places of North America and how they could actually be some of the Dogman sightings. And it was just a fascinating episode. If you haven't listened to it, I would recommend all listeners go listen to it. I'll have the link in the show notes. But a lot of people started contacting me and they were like, you need to talk to Ryan because he's had a very interesting account and an encounter that you might be interested in if you're looking into that as well.
Oh, yes. Yep. I sure did. And it's something that I have never, ever forgotten. I don't think I ever will.
Would you be able to share that on the show tonight?
Absolutely. I can go right into it if you'd like.
Absolutely. Let's go for it.
It happened about 3 years ago, and it's funny, we're in October because it happened in October. But a friend of mine and his wife, they were going away on vacation, so I was asked to house sit for them. And what I would do is I would go in the morning, I'd go in the afternoon. I had a late night trip that I would take about midnight, and that would be my final checkup for the day. And on this particular night, when I was going up about midnight, maybe a little bit later, I noticed that the coyotes in the surrounding area, they sounded really nervous. And if you've ever been around coyotes before, they have a very distinct cry when they're on the hunt. But this night, they actually really sounded like they were scared. And I didn't really pay much mind to it. I just figured there was maybe another pack that was rivaling them out there. And so I continued my way up to my friend's backyard. And he has a driveway that kind of curls around to the back. So I was walking alongside that, and nothing unusual was happening. But as I got closer to the back, I noticed this really pungent odor. And the only way I can describe this is like feces, urine, body sweat, and rotting meat. Okay. Now, in my mind, this was maybe roadkill. So again, I paid no real mind to this. But as I'm venturing further into the back, I notice there's something moving around. I can hear something or somebody moving about. Now, he lived near riverbeds, and in that part of the town where we lived in, there was a lot of homeless people. So I thought maybe it was a vagrant trying to creep onto his property. And me being only 5'9", I figured it's time to go into defense mode. So I puff up my chest, I make my arms stiff and rigid, and I go, "Hey!" And it goes completely quiet. So I keep continuing along my way, and again, I hear the noises of something making very heavy footsteps. So again, I stop in my place, and I just go, "Hey!" This time, Jeremiah, it wasn't silence that I was met with. It was a very deep, resonating growl that I could feel in my chest. And it felt like my bones, like my rib cage, was vibrating. And it kind of stunned me for a minute. I didn't know what this was. So I thought maybe a bear, but then the logical brain kicked in, said there's no bears in this part of Arizona. So then it went to mountain lion. But the thing is, this didn't sound like a mountain lion growl. They have a very distinct growl. So I just kept going forward into the backyard. And that's when I noticed there was something moving right in his backyard where the tree line was. And so I stopped, and I'm looking like, what is this? Because it seemed like a really tall human, about maybe 6.5 feet tall. Okay. And what happened is the security lights in the back clicked on. And when the lights hit what was back there, Jeremiah, it wasn't a human. It wasn't a mountain lion. It was something that looked distinctly hyena. So I'm looking at this, and I'm like, there's no hyenas in Arizona. What is this thing? And I'm scared because I see what looks just like a hyena. And it sees me. I can see its eyes fixed right on my eyes. It's staring me right in the eyes. And nothing happens for a brief moment, but then it suddenly charges forward about 3 feet. And it stops on a dime, and I'm frozen in terror at this point. I'm not going to move. I'm not going to even breathe. And this thing's staring at me, and it stands up, and I hear this loud pop as it reaches its arms up, and it grabs a branch, and it just sits there staring at me. And in the lights, I can see its ears going up and down. Its head is moving side to side like a curious dog would do. And I'm trying to figure out, what am I looking at? This can't be a hyena, but what is this thing? And I'm not moving. I'm not going to run. And it keeps staring at me, and I can see its lips moving up and down. I can see its nostrils moving. And then finally, it starts to back away very slowly, but it's keeping me in its line of sight. So it's got its body tilted, so its eyes are right on me, but it's got its body curved so it can walk away. I watch it walk away, and it goes down the hill into the riverbed. And the minute it's out of sight, man, I had rockets in my shoes. I'm running up the stairs to my friend's house. I'm locking all his doors. I'm bolting his windows. I'm opening his kitchen drawers, looking for knives. And I call him up, and I was like, is there something you're not telling me, man? There's a hyena in your backyard. And he thinks I'm crazy. He's like, there's no hyenas in Arizona, Ryan. This. So whatever you saw, it wasn't a hyena. And that clicked with me. I'm thinking, all right, it wasn't a hyena, but what was it? So I started looking into Linda Godfrey's work, and I read that some people had seen bipedal hyenas. And right there, that's when I knew I saw a dogman.
That's incredible. A bipedal. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. Do you mind if I ask you some questions about that?
Fire away.
Okay. What were defining features that you saw that made you think, oh, this is a hyena when you looked at the creature?
The main things that said hyena to me were the shape of the snout, the squareness of the head, the roundness of the ears, and the long neck that it had.
Okay. Was there anything, so if you look at an actual hyena, they have that characteristic slope, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was there anything that was built into the creature at all?
Oh yeah, definitely. Most definitely. When it was on two legs, when it was standing up, I could see that it had that slope going on, and it had the little tufts of fur running along the back.
Very interesting. Was there any kind of pattern?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it definitely had the spots that you would see with a spotted hyena. It had that kind of thing, and it had the like a caramel color to its fur.
Interesting. I've gotten a few emails, as I would guess that you have. And this one listener asked me this. He brought up this where it's like, he brought up the point where it's like, if there's stripes on it, I think he said if there's stripes on it, then that is indicative of more of an extinct hyena that would be that lived in North America a long time ago. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, I did speak to Ken Gearhart some time back about this, and he thought maybe it was one of those prehistoric hyenas as well.
Oh no, definitely not. How did you, after you had this sighting, what was your thinking after that? Did it take weeks to try to work through what you saw, or how was your internal monologue after you saw this?
I was actually convinced that I was crazy because I knew hyenas aren't in Arizona, but I was also afraid. So going out and taking the trash out at night, or even walking my dog at night, I was convinced that when I went around a corner or anywhere where there was a lot of trees, this thing was going to be right there. So it took me a long time where I had to just sit and accept what I saw. I had to read the stories of other people that saw something similar to know I wasn't crazy. And I had to reassure myself that no, it's not going to be hunting you. It's not going to be coming after you. You have to be calm and logical about this. But it took me at least 3, maybe 4 weeks to even want to go outside again.
Wow. This is a topic where it's not the main topic I look into. It's become like almost a side quest in a way. And I will say that, and I'm not going to really say why right now, but it may become a little bit more of a side quest, as if you continue to listen, listeners, you'll get it in a little bit. But it's such a fascinating topic. And I'm sure it sounds like you've read the books, you've talked to people. Have there been other sightings of creatures that looked like bipedal hyenas in different parts of the US that you've heard of?
Yeah, actually, there was more in the town that I was living in. Because once I got over the fear and I decided that I wanted answers, I started going around and looking for clues. I would investigate the hills and the valleys we had and go up into the smaller mountains. And what happened is one time when I was doing an investigation, I came upon this dirt mound. It was like a shrine almost, made of mud and sand. And it was a staircase that was leading up to a silver platter with exotic fruits on it. And by exotic, I mean like kiwi, pineapple, blueberries. But there was no signs of like quail or rabbits nearby. So I was kind of wondering, why would they be feeding something out here in the middle of the desert? So I left a note. I was brazen enough to leave a note asking the people, what are you feeding? So I left a note under the platter, and I came back a few weeks later, and to my surprise, Jeremiah, there was a drawing. Somebody said, we're feeding these. And they drew a picture of a bipedal hyena. So that right there was like, okay, somebody else in this town has seen them as well. They know they're here.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So that really got me very, very curious, because somebody out there had seen the same exact thing that I did. So I wasn't crazy, Jeremiah. I had seen something. I'm like, yes, this is what I needed.
Oh man. So that's like that's got to be incredible, having seen something and then getting that someone else has experienced. Like, this is actually real, and I didn't just.
Yeah. It felt like there was a weight lifted from my shoulders. Like I wasn't nuts. I wasn't insane. Somebody who doesn't even know me had seen the same thing that I did.
Wow. Did you ever get any different kind of communication with these people that left you the note, or was it just a one-off note back and forth?
It was just like a one-off note. I think what happened is they didn't want to share too much, because I get the feeling from the way they drew these things that they actually care for them, that they're trying to habituate them and domesticate them. So I think there's some kind of attachment there, and they weren't sure of what my intentions were. That was kind of a letdown in a way, but like I said, I still walked away going, oh, hallelujah, somebody else saw the same thing I did. This is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think, just based off of what you know, do you think it's a smart idea to try to do what these people are doing, where they're offering food and habituating, things like that?
No, I really don't.
Yeah.
Because there's so many factors to put in here, Jeremiah. Like, what happens if they get so used to you feeding them and then, lo and behold, you miss a day? Are they going to get irritated and angry and come looking for you? Are they going to think your kid is food, your pet? I don't think it's a good idea. I think there's a lot of dangers to take into consideration here. I really do.
Yeah, very close to how I think about when I think about people leaving food out for Bigfoot, and it's just like fill in the blank with any other large predator. If they get used to food and then you are the person who doesn't give them food, they're not going to act probably nice to you.
And on the flip side of that, you don't want to take a predator and turn it where it's reliant on you, because it'll lose that hunting capability. You don't want that to happen.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Did you ever try talking to any law enforcement officials in your town about it?
I did. Most of them were, those things aren't real. But there was a guy who was a neighbor of mine. Actually, he was a retired police officer. And when I talked to him about it, he didn't really say one way or the other, but just from his mannerisms and his body language, I got the feeling that he too saw some stuff. You know, because he didn't do that whole, oh, those things aren't real. You didn't see what you think you saw. He just went, I know, Ryan. I know. So it did make me wonder, did he see something?
Wow. And the place where you originally saw it, was it ever seen again at that?
No, but it was seen just a few miles away. Because when I went out investigating on another day, I actually came across a guy who was a paranormal investigator, ironically enough. And I told him, you got to be really careful in this area. There's a lot of wildlife. And he just looks me right in the eyes, Jeremiah, and he's like, yeah, there's more than local wildlife. And that got my curiosity, because that's not a normal response. So I'm like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And he's like, I saw something a few nights ago. And he's like, I'm going to share it with you, so don't think I'm crazy. So I played along. He told me how he saw two of these things, a larger one and an infant feeding on a dead javelina. So again, I got confirmation that I wasn't nuts, that I did see this bipedal hyena, because other people had seen it too.
And for listeners who aren't familiar with wildlife from that area, a javelina is a type of pig, correct?
It's a very angry pig, though. It's one that you don't want to mess with.
Okay. Fair enough. So you've got multiple sightings of this creature, and more than one creature in a, sounds like a small region or within miles of each other, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's a very small town. Any encounters are close by. So obviously, whatever these things are, they staked turf in that town, I think. And it would make sense, though, because there's a lot of abandoned mines, because it's a mining town. So there's shelter, and there's plenty of game, and there's plenty of water, too. So really, it was ideal for these things to live there.
Wow. Have you, is there like a newspaper archive of the town or the area?
Yeah.
See if there's any weird things in the old newspapers?
Yeah. In fact, there's a museum that was not too far from where I was actually living. And in the newspapers they had there, they did talk about how they were seeing strange wildlife that didn't quite belong. And some of the way they described it sounded like they were describing hyenas.
Really? Can you elaborate on what? Because I know when there's old articles about Bigfoot in the 1800s, sometimes they say things like wild man, and you have to connect the dots type thing. Is that the same thing when you're talking about hyena/dogman in old newspapers?
More or less, but they were talking about how there was like wild dog attacks, but then certain residents would go on to describe them as not really dogs, but they couldn't place what kind of animal they were. Now, living out in the desert, you're going to know coyotes, okay? You're going to know even wolves, even as rare as that is to see them in that town. You're going to know what they are. It's not going to leave any room for confusion, but these people were genuinely confused by what they were seeing. They described spots and everything. So I'm going, wait a minute, did they see these things?
Wow. Do you have a book about this, Ryan?
No, but I am working on one.
Okay, because you probably need to have one. That's awesome, dude. Wow.
Oh,
How many years have you been researching this in that area?
Dogman, it's about 3 years now, but
Okay.
altogether 20 years. I was researching up at Mount Lemmon in Arizona. I've been in Tucson doing investigations down there. I've been to Phoenix, Flagstaff. I've been all over Arizona doing this stuff.
Have you found that excuse my ignorance because I'm trying to learn about this topic, right? So I'm not really aware of Arizona. Is Arizona have quite a few sightings of Dogman in that state then?
Oh, yes. But we also have our own Bigfoot, the Mogollon monster from the Mogollon
yes.
Rim.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with that one.
Yes.
And I've been to the Mogollon Rim, and oh man, it's such a beautiful place.
It looks so beautiful. If you don't know about what it looks like, you got to look it up, because people, when they hear Arizona, I think they're thinking desert.
Yeah.
Man, you look at the Mogollon Rim and it is just forested, beautiful. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you can definitely see how a Bigfoot type creature would be living in that environment as well.
Oh, definitely. That's why when people say, "Oh, Ryan, that's crazy. Bigfoot can't live out there. There's no water or trees." I'm like, are you sure about that?
Yeah, I put it right up there with people that say Bigfoot can't live in Oklahoma. Well, you don't really know what Oklahoma is.
I'm curious. Why can Bigfoot not live in Oklahoma? What is there, like a tax for living there or what?
They just don't know about how the southeast part of the state is extremely...
Okay. So they fall for the stereotypes then. Okay.
Exactly.
All right. I got you.
So going back to Arizona and Dogman, I know of places like Texas, and you've got the work of Aaron Deese, and he's done the Dogman Triangle, but sounds like there are multiple different areas in Arizona where there have been Dogman sightings over the years.
Oh, yeah. Tucson, you'd be surprised, even though it's a city, a lot of people have seen Dogman in Tucson as well. These encounters are happening all over Arizona. And I think people need to start looking into that because there's something to it.
Have all these encounters, have they all looked like hyenas then, or are there different ways that Dogman look like? With Bigfoot, there's different almost versions of them?
As with Bigfoot, I do run into those encounters that are very different. They're like the dog soldier type, or they have a German Shepherd type, but a lot of them are a hyena type. And I was saying to somebody a long time ago, if people are seeing a lot of these hyenas, then we need to start looking into what it is about Arizona where the hyena type are more abundant. There has to be some kind of answer to that question. Is it the fauna and flora of this place? Is it the layout of the land? What is it that's bringing the hyena type to Arizona? And if you look at the place, if we look at Arizona in general, it's very similar to Africa, Jeremiah. So something that's like a hyena could easily just acclimate to this place.
Oh, that's wild. Yeah, totally, man. I didn't even think about that. Are they also found in Southern California, in New Mexico as well, or is it just more in Arizona area?
From what I've researched, it's more Arizona.
Okay.
But California will get the scant report of that type. New Mexico, the same thing. But in those places, you get more of the werewolf type. So there's something about Arizona where it's attracting the hyena types.
Very interesting. In the Bigfoot community, as we talked about earlier, you have your classic stories. You have like the Patterson Gimlin film, others like maybe Albert Osmond, stuff like that. Are there stories that are always talked about in Arizona when it comes to dog, different things that always...
Yeah, you get to hear about their aggression in a lot of the stories that I hear. They're hyper aggressive, hyper vigilant, that are chasing people out of camps and chasing them down hiking trails. So that seems to be a trademark here for the Dogman in Arizona. They have bad attitudes. So I got to wonder if maybe it's because they live in such a hot climate where they just don't like people. The hot weather's making them irritated.
Oh, yeah. I haven't really heard of any stories where it's been a nice Dogman. Have you heard of any nice Dogman stories?
None that I can verify. Okay. I do get people that will come to me and say, hey, I have a clan of dogmen that protect my territory, and they protect my property, and they protect my kids and protect my livestock. And well, that's great. That's fantastic. But where's the proof though? There's no pictures. There's nothing to show that it's 100% happening. And as a researcher, I do have to have some skepticism. A healthy dose is always a good thing. So when they can't provide evidence, I got to go, are you telling me the truth or is this just a story?
That's so important. Has there been any interesting evidence gathered about the dogman in Arizona that you've heard about so far?
Nothing yet. And I keep waiting with bated breath. Every morning I wake up, Jeremiah, going, please let there be some kind of great evidence that's going to be a case breaker. And nothing yet. I'm hoping in my time I'll see it, but nothing yet.
Gotcha. So right now we're looking at, so your personal sightings you've heard of, any photos of like large tracks or anything like that?
I have some, but I'm not brazen enough to just say those are dogman footprints.
Sure.
I'm still trying to go through the entire catalog of wildlife and eliminate what it could be. And if it doesn't match up with anything in the books, then I could say maybe it's a dogman track.
Yeah, it's very smart, I think. You have to be careful about what you put out there. I see enough things come into my email.
Well, you have to debunk yourself. As a researcher, you can't just jump to the conclusion of the impossible. You have to take a real good, solid look at it and say, okay, it could be other things. So let's eliminate these first, and we'll go through it one by one. And if we don't come up with answers, we can say maybe, possibly. But don't just put it out there, but, oh, by the way, this is a dogman track, and it turns out to be a German Shepherd or something like that. You got to be careful.
Absolutely. This area that you're seeing all the hyena bipeds, is this around any military bases or reservations or anything?
Oh, yeah, plenty of reservations. Yes. Okay. Yes, not really close to any Air Force bases. They're about 60 miles away from that. But there are a lot of reservations, yes.
Have you ever been able to get any contacts with anyone that would be involved with any of the reservations to talk about?
Oh, yeah. This is how I got into the study of skinwalkers. All
right. So, I was going to let you, I was like, I wonder if, I don't know enough if I can broach it, but so you actually studied that as well.
Yes. And I'm very proud of it, Jeremiah, so you can bring it up whenever you want. I'm not ashamed of it. So what happened is a lot of people were suggesting that what I had seen was in fact a skinwalker. And so I started looking into the skinwalker stuff, and I would see the typical YouTube videos, the creepypasta stuff, but I had a feeling that it wasn't accurate information, okay? And so I started looking around even deeper and reading different books, and I saw, wow, what I saw on YouTube was far from what I'm reading in these books. So the only way I'm going to find any answers is if I speak to the Navajo people, okay? So I gathered a friend and I told him, hey, you got to bring me to the reservation because I have some questions that I have to ask them about these skinwalkers. And he warned me. He told me, hey, look, you're a white dude, Ryan, so they're not going to take kindly to this. But still, I persisted because I needed to do this. I walked onto the reservation and I was acting like I was Mr. Mighty Mite over here, 10 feet tall and bulletproof. I walked into this crowd of people and I just stood in one place. I'm like, okay, so who wants to tell me about these skinwalkers? And the looks that I got, Jeremiah, I turned to my friend and I was like, I am going to die because these people were not happy. So we stood there in an awkward silence for about 10 minutes. And this old couple walks up to me and the man took me by the hand. He's like, why do you want to know of the Yi Nararushi? And so I told him, look, I saw this weird animal and people have said it's possibly a skinwalker. And I need to know. And plus, I want to take your actual stories and put the truth out there. So he and his wife agreed to talk to me. They talked to me for about like maybe 3-4 hours. And they gave me so much information.
Wow. Oh man, I can't believe you did that. That's probably the gutsiest move that I've heard someone take on this podcast over the last
It might have been a little
in an interview on my part. That's wild, dude. But how cool is it? So they spent a few hours with you just going over everything. My goodness.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They sat me down and they did a blessing over me first because talking about the Yi Nararushi, it's a very serious matter for them. They don't take it lightly. And so I learned to take it just as serious as they do. And they told me where they came from and what to watch out for. And they gave me so much stuff that I can never express enough gratitude to them. It's like, wow, you really opened my eyes. And that's how I was able to conclude that what I had seen was not a skinwalker. It was something separate.
Wow. I know the information, usually if I hear in interviews when people talk about information like that they've gotten from reservations, it's sometimes very protected information. Is
Yes.
anything from that you can share with the audience, or is it's things that you have to, hold back a little bit on?
I'm actually able to share whatever. As
Okay.
whatever question you have, I can answer it because they told me you can share it. Just please keep our people in mind and answer it the correct way. And I made them a promise that I would not add anything to it. I would not detract from it. I would take it just as serious as they do and hold it to my heart as they do.
Okay, cool. From what they said, let's start with this. So how would you define what a skinwalker actually is according to what they told you?
Okay, the best way to put it is it's a shaman who learns the magic and the rituals and the chants of the Dene people, okay? And rather than healing the people with it, they use it to cause chaos and destruction amongst their own tribes. And it's not like a werewolf. It's not one of those things where they change by a full moon. No, what they have to do is they take the pelt of certain animals, so like coyotes, wolves, those kind of things. And the reason why they take those certain pelts is because it's a slight against their belief. To take the pelt of a predatory animal is the same as giving the middle finger to their creator. So what they do is they take these pelts and they take them back to caves, and they have to do all these chants and incantations and ceremonies for days and sometimes even weeks before they can don that pelt to take the form.
Wow. In a few interviews, I've talked to individuals about skinwalkers. From what you've heard, can they actually turn into animals such as coyotes?
Yes, I believe they can. The name Yin. So what that name implies is that they turn into the four-legged animal. They don't take on a bipedal form of the said animal. They go into the four-legged form, the actual animal itself. And from what I've been told, the only way to tell a skinwalker apart from the actual animal is to look at the eyes. Even in animal form, they'll have very human eyes.
And that's a thing where when people have skinwalker stories, these are things that are actually happening in current times. There are people that are skinwalkers and turning into coyotes, et cetera, that's happening in present.
Right. It is. And I think people like to denounce it and say, oh, it's not happening in current times because they don't believe there's still shaman. But it's part of their religious belief to have shaman. There will always be shaman. So as long as there are those shaman, the medical people, the medicine men, there's going to be potential skinwalkers.
That's very, very interesting. And go ahead. Yeah.
It's frightening. It's very frightening. And I'll admit, when I first started researching these skinwalkers, I was skeptical because I was like, somebody transforming into an animal, that can't be true. But after listening to this elderly couple, they changed my mind, Jeremiah. Like, they opened my eyes so wide that I see everything now. I'm like, whoa, okay, these things are real. So I will never, ever doubt what they say about the...
When you were talking to them, did it ever, you asked them about skinwalkers, did it ever come up about the hyenas and what you had seen? Did that ever come up at all? Or was it just everything was focused on what they believed regarding skinwalkers?
It came up very briefly. And the old man, he had a spiritual view on my hyena encounter. He said that I was chosen because of my heart, because I have such an open mind and I'm such a gentle soul that whatever this was, it had chosen me so I would know the truth. And really, when he said that, I can't even word it the way he did it. It was so beautiful that I was just like, I'm going to go with that. I'm going to believe that it chose me because I'm a good person. It wanted me to see it. It wanted me to know the truth. I'm going to go with that. I'm going to run with that.
It's so interesting, and it's a lot of new information, and I'm very thankful that you're able to share it. A few minutes ago, you had mentioned, when we were talking about types of dogman, you'd mentioned something about dog soldiers. Can you explain, is that a different type of dogman, or what is it exactly does that mean?
What it is we're comparing it to the movie Dog Soldiers. Some people say that the dogman they see is very close in appearance to the werewolves from that film. And I think that's actually a really good comparison because some people do describe those really tall dogmen that have the muscles and they're really fast and aggressive. So that's what I mean when I say dog soldiers.
Gotcha. I guess I have a new movie to watch then.
Oh, you haven't seen that one yet?
Dude, I really haven't. No,
Oh,
not at all.
Jeremiah, you, my
Yeah.
friend, are in for a treat. It is such a fantastic movie. It's so well done. There's no campiness to it. There's no cheesiness to it. They take the whole werewolf lore very seriously. The acting is top notch. You're going to love it. I'm such a geek for that movie, dude.
I love it. Awesome. There was an individual I talked to, this is probably years ago, and we had a really interesting conversation about Dogman. And I'm going to bring it up, and I'm just curious if you've ever heard anything like this before. Just get your viewpoint on it. Have you ever heard of that Dogman could be potentially used by the U.S. government, or there could be like that's type of alien connection or anything like that?
Oh, yeah, I've heard both those theories. In fact, I believe that some of these dogmen that we're seeing, I think they're interdimensional beings. I don't think they originated here. Because when you really look at it, you hear stories of how somebody shot a dogman with a really big rifle, right? And they know for sure that the bullet hit it, but there was no wound, no effect. And I have to wonder if it's similar to the Mothman in a way. It's like an ultra-terrestrial where its vibration is higher than ours. So the bullets just phase right through it.
That is, it was, I believe it was Jody Cook I was talking to a few years ago, and it blew me away when I first heard that. I was like, oh my goodness, this is crazy.
Jody does some great work. He is a good worker.
You've heard of the sightings on the Skinwalker Ranch location, like way back in the day. This is like not current owner, but way back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you believe, what do you think may have happened there? Do you think that was maybe a dogman or like maybe some type of prehistoric animal? Or
I'm open to both possibilities, but from the way they described it, it doesn't sound like your typical dogman. It sounds like maybe it was a very interesting, different kind of animal. It could be prehistoric, but really, from my recollection, it didn't sound like your typical dogman encounter. So,
do you think there seems to be a interesting theme when you look into enough cryptid reports? There seems to be this interesting thread where it's like in different parts of the US, there's these animals being seen that seem to be maybe, it's almost like they look like they're prehistoric animals, but it doesn't make sense because they shouldn't be around anymore. Have you heard of any accounts that sound similar to that?
Yeah, there was actually one guy that I knew years back. He passed away some time ago, but he actually said that he saw what was like a velociraptor. And what's really interesting is he didn't describe it like you see in Jurassic Park. The way he described it was a very small feathered dinosaur, and he saw it chasing some javelina down here. But he said that it didn't leave any footprints, and it looked like it was fading in and fading out.
So, Ryan, my kid is big time into dinosaurs, so I'm going to flex a little bit. Do you know that the Velociraptor in Jurassic Park is way bigger than they actually were? And Spielberg made them a lot bigger so that they would look cooler.
I love that you know that.
That's the trivia, dudes. Me hearing that you said that this guy saw a Velociraptor that was a lot smaller, that's probably more the size that it was actually the size of it.
That's why when he was telling me this, I was like, how do you know what size they were? Wow, so you know your science. Okay, so I'm listening. You got my attention now. All right. Because he could have made something up and said, oh, yeah, they were just like the ones from Jurassic Park and they were chasing people around. But he didn't say that. He was like, they were small. They weren't huge. And they did have feathers. So I'm going, okay, continue. That was exciting for me, too, because I'm a science geek. So I was like, yes.
Wow. And was that in your same area then, or
no, this was over in Wilcox.
Okay.
I wasn't there, so I couldn't call him crazy, but he was accurate about it though, Jeremiah. You know how it is when somebody's accurate about something that's not really common acceptance, you can go, oh, I'll certainly hear you out now.
It's just wild. That's one of the big things where I don't know how to explain away, like, why would a guy just randomly come up with the idea, I'm going to make up a story about seeing a small velociraptor, or a guy in New York State where he's going to just pretend to see, I believe they were giant sloths out in
Right.
Sherman, New York area.
Right. That's so obscure that you would think that if he were to make it up, he'd know. It's not going to get me any notoriety or any fame because they're not really popular monsters or popular creatures. You think he'd make up something a little bit more fantastical?
Yeah, it's weird. If listeners haven't heard about the Sherman, New York incident, the Moth Boys have a really awesome book out about it. You should check it out. It's a great read. Transitioning a little bit to a completely different subject, but I want to make sure we chat about it. Just because when I hear people bring up your name, they also tend to bring up the subject of Wendigos as well.
Yes. All right. Mission accomplished.
Yeah. This is a topic that has never been, I think the only time it's been broached was during the Clubhouse days a few years ago when we would let people, or when I would let people just chat about whatever they want during the times of the pandemic on Clubhouse. But I've never actually, it sounds like you are really well versed on the topics. Yeah. Feel free to introduce what we're dealing with.
Okay, so there's two different archetypes for the Wendigo, okay? You have the one that you've seen all over social media, I'm sure, where it's a big furry creature with a tail, long claws, and a stag's head, okay? That, Jeremiah, is not how the Wendigo was portrayed by the Algonquin, the Cree, and the Ojibwe, okay? The real Wendigo is depicted as a very emaciated, very pale, very gaunt human that was taken over by the Wendigo or Wetigo spirit. Okay, so a Wendigo could be you or I, but we'd get possessed by this thing after we messed around a bit too much with our cultural taboos. Now, cannibalism is the most popular, okay, but greed, envy, even a curse or bad dreams from the Pewaganok, which are spirit guides or spirit creatures in the Algonquin belief, could cause you or I to become a Wendigo. So really, there's a big misconception on the Wendigo lore, and I want to bring the real, true lore to light. So I'll be working on a book of the Wendigo as well, because it's so just mixed up that people don't really know what the Wendigo is anymore.
Does this even belong in the realm of cryptids then?
In my opinion, no. Yeah. In my opinion, it's more supernatural / paranormal because we're talking about a spirit, okay? We're not talking about a cryptid, which a cryptid is an unverified animal that's rumored to exist, okay? Right. And no, the Wendigo isn't an animal. It doesn't take on the form of any animal at all. So it belongs more in the paranormal area than it does cryptids.
Is that something that they say still occurs today, or was it just during a certain time period that things like that would occur?
Oh, no, the belief of the Wendigo is still very much alive and well in the Canadian territories. It's one of those things that they're going to believe in it no matter what. It doesn't matter what anybody says. It's going to stay a staple in their beliefs, and rightfully so.
Have there been, and I guess this is where it gets tricky, because you have the one side where they're saying it's this crazy looking creature, and the other side where it's not that at all. But are there reports of people seeing what they believe to be this creature then?
Oh, yeah, there's plenty of them. If you've ever visited TikTok, you'll see videos every day going, I saw a Wendigo. And then you watch the video and it's just like this white costume or whatever. And you're going, how is that a Wendigo? You know what? Where did you get Wendigo from this? In fact, there was a video a long time back. I don't know if you've seen it, Jeremiah, where somebody filmed a quote unquote Wendigo stalking a moose on the side of the road.
Yeah.
You know the one I'm talking about then? Yeah. So when I watched that, I was so disappointed because I'm like, how is this a Wendigo? Why would it be stalking the moose when you're right there? The Wendigo's a cannibal. Cannibal means it eats other humans. So it's going to go for a moose when you're right there? No.
It's weird because that same exact video, I've seen it used for different things. So I've seen it. Yeah,
I've seen it used for the rake. I've seen it used for Wendigo. I've seen it used for so much stuff.
Yeah, which that's a whole different ball of yarn.
Don't get me started on the rake, man.
There's some really interesting research going on about it, and I really hope that research continues. But yeah, that's a whole different story in itself. But have you
Yes.
actually been able to interview people close to maybe people in different tribal backgrounds about the Wendigo, or how close have you gotten to this?
My friend, actually, he's more like my brother, William Nighthawk. He's a Lakota
Mm.
shaman and elder. He actually has talked to me numerous times about his people's belief in the Wendigo. And I credit him big time with my knowledge and the way that he's really opened my eyes to this thing. But he's really been my best source. He's been an incredible source, Jeremiah. I would recommend you talk to him too. He's amazing. And he told me his perspectives, his personal beliefs, and yeah, it's frightening when you really get to hear it from indigenous people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Would you ever consider going up to different places in Canada to try to get a closer look at certain areas to do with the Wendigo, or is it a thing where you're doing your research from afar?
I'm half and half on that. Like a part of me does want to go see these areas for myself, but I've grown to believe in it enough where I'm going, yeah, do I really want to do this, or would I be in peril in some form or fashion?
Yeah, absolutely. Is this up in, or I guess I could say, what provinces are these usually reported in?
All over Canada.
Oh
Minnesota has a
man,
few reports as well. So I think really wherever the cold weather is really abundant, that's where the Wendigo is going to go.
ooh, Minnesota.
Yeah,
That's
and in my
hmm,
perspective, in my opinion, the Wendigo is a weather spirit. So when winter comes along, that's the Wendigo's time to play.
gotcha. Probably even up in the Yukon and Northwest Territories, I would imagine too.
Absolutely, yes.
Oh man, there's some weird stuff up there, dude. I don't know if you've ever
Oh,
looked into.
oh
No.
yeah. With my basis of studies, because I do cover the lore and the oral traditions of the indigenous tribes, and so I've started looking into different Bigfoot stories from up there, the Genosqua and all those things, and a lot of them happen up there. Yeah, there's some weird stuff going on.
I've actually, I believe I've heard that term once, but I don't think it's ever actually come up in an interview. Do you mind sharing about that?
Sure, Genosqua. It's a Bigfoot, and the name Genosqua means stonish giant. And where that name is derived from is according to what they have said in their stories. This type of Bigfoot was so smart that what it did, it would roll in sap and then roll in the river rocks to create like an applique armor that would be used against the flint arrowheads of the time. So these Bigfoot would come down from the mountains wearing this armor, and they would raid the villages and steal men and women and children to feast upon them. And the braves were helpless against them because their arrowheads would break when they hit the river rocks. And that right there, it's not just terrifying because they came for people, but they were smart enough to actually wear armor. Let that sink in for a moment. They were actually
Mm,
prepared for battle.
yeah, that is wild. Is that from a certain part of Canada?
Yeah, that's really that's carried around a lot by the Algonquin people, and they do actually have such fear of them that what they would do, Jeremiah, is every night once they got the flintlock pistols, they would fire into the woods every single night just to keep the Genosqua away.
Wow. Oh my goodness, that's a whole rabbit trail I've never gone down. I'll have to remember that. That's really
Oh,
cool.
definitely. Definitely. You're going to find it very fascinating like I did. I got hooked. When I started reading this kind of stuff, I was like, okay, this is my field of study now. This is where I'm staying.
Yeah, the most I've gotten into with, I guess you could say, Southeast Alaska / Canada is just the legends of four-toed Sasquatch, and just
Mhm.
extremely aggressive, and there's just some really interesting native tales of,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
And if you
some,
ever get the chance to
yeah.
hear them actually tell it to you firsthand, don't ever pass it up, Jeremiah. The way they tell it, it's so passionate. It's one of those things that you're going to be hooked.
Oh, I
You know,
know.
you ever heard anybody tell a story that like you're doubting at first, but once they start telling it, it's done with such passion and such drive that it just hooks you, and you're like, wow, that's what
Absolutely.
they're usually like. Yeah, if you ever get the chance, take it.
In your research down in Arizona, and it sounds like you're all over the place. You're talking to people. You're probably to the point where people are coming to you because your name is out there in the area as the guy who wants to hear all the weird stuff. Have you had any for Bigfoot reports given to you down there from Arizona?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There was a couple that I used to know that be on Rim, and the husband believed in Bigfoot, but the wife didn't. And they were camping there. That was supposed to be for the weekend. And during the night, something was coming to their camp and throwing rocks at their tent. And the husband got a little too arrogant and he started throwing rocks back. And they said they heard this just blood curdling roar. And they heard something very massive trying to run out of the woods towards them. So they literally picked up camp, leaving their tent behind, their cooler behind, got into the truck and went home. So that was like, yeah, you probably shouldn't mess with Bigfoot.
Yeah, definitely not. Are there ever any, have you ever heard any like interaction between Bigfoot and the Dogman in that area? Has that ever come up in Arizona at all?
Not so much here. I have seen other people on social media say that they have both Bigfoot and Dogman on their property, but I've never heard anybody in Arizona claim that.
Gotcha. There any other, we've talked about, for Arizona, we've talked about some Bigfoot, some Dogman, we've talked about, are there any other weird things that are happening down there?
We have ghosts, because Tombstone, the shootout at the OK Corral, a lot of people report seeing the ghosts of Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. You know, who knows? Maybe that's possible. I think Doc Holliday was too stubborn to die, so his ghost is still walking around somewhere. And I'm sure maybe he'll walk up to somebody and just tell them, "I'll be your Huckleberry."
Yeah, right, there you go. Classic. Are there many UFO alien interactions that you've run into down there?
No alien sightings, but I do get a lot of UFO stuff. In fact, the Phoenix Lights, remember that case?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's Phoenix, Arizona. And that was a very famous UFO sighting. Unfortunately, I missed it. And go figure, something that big and I miss it.
Yeah. What was that in was it 90s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember seeing the video of it. It was pretty wild.
Yeah, it's insane. I saw Starlink. And I was like, I thought that was a UFO. I actually had Ashley on the phone and she was like, "Ryan, good Lord."
I can just hear her saying that too.
Ashley's my little curb stomper. When I'm being stupid, she's like, "Ryan, knock it off."
Yeah, she'll get you. Yeah. But
in
a good way, for sure. Do you let's say if we have listeners and they're mainly going to be people that are into Bigfoot, I think, if I know my listeners, and a lot of them are like, when they hear about Bigfoot, they hear about different things. Oh, I want to go out and look for Bigfoot. So do people in the Dogman community, do they also do the same thing where they're like, I'm going to go out and look for Dogman? Or is it handled a little bit differently?
It's a bit different because what you see a lot with the Dogman people is these people want to go out to kill Dogman. Like they're determined to go out and get the biggest gun they can and bring one in. And I always tell them, you got to be so careful doing that, okay? Because, yeah, you're going out looking for a Dogman, but who's to say you won't shoot somebody innocent? And these things probably know what guns are. So you're starting a fight. Can you finish that fight, though? What if there's more than one? How many rounds can you squeeze off before they get you?
Have there been any incidents, you think, where there have been people that have been killed by a Dogman?
Oh, I'm sure some of the missing 411. I don't think all of them are Dogman, but I'm sure some of them might be. And it's something that warrants further investigation for sure.
This is very interesting. What are, let's say if you've got someone where they're like, would love to look more into trying to get the lore and the information, what are maybe some good resources that you could recommend people check out book-wise?
Well, as far as Dogman goes, Linda Godfrey's books. That woman was just amazing with all the information she brought to us, and may she rest in peace. She's the godmother of Dogman. Pick up her books and read them from cover to cover and reach out to people like me or Jeremiah. Ask questions. That's the best way you're going to learn, is interacting with other people that have interests like this.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the more I learn, definitely people reach out. I'm trying to get some, I have mainly Bigfoot resources right now, but slowly I'm getting some Dogman books just because it's becoming such a large topic over the years.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think there's a reason for why over the last few years, is it because of Linda Godfrey's books, or?
I think it could be because of her books, but I think also people feel more comfortable to share encounters with Dogman nowadays. If you think back maybe like 10 years ago, right? If you mentioned that you saw a werewolf, Bigfoot people would laugh at you. Whereas nowadays, Bigfoot people will take an interest in your story. So I think people really do feel better coming forward with these tales. And I think that's a great thing because we're getting more and more pieces to this really complex puzzle.
I agree. Definitely. Do you think there's certain parts of the US where different things seem to congregate in, maybe different like high strangeness or cryptids? Do you think there's any validity to that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You get some very weird reports from different states, and it's things that don't happen in, say, my particular state. I don't get that, but it's such a high number of reports in another state that you have to look at that and go, okay, so it's happening there. And then there's similar events happening in a different state. Yeah, I would definitely go with that.
Do you think there's any, I know there's a few ways of looking at this, but do you have any thoughts about why in different parts they seem to be?
It could be energies as far as high strangeness goes, or spirits go. It's the energy of the land. And as far as cryptids go, I think it's what's there for them. It's the food, it's the shelter, the availability of water, or perhaps even like the availability of a mate. That's something that animals would need to look into. Any animal that wants to survive, it has those necessities. So if a certain state has what it needs, it's going to stay there.
Gotcha. Do you think there's any validity? You see these videos all the time, different resources where it's like national parks were created for different reasons, where they created because of cryptids. Do you think that's just like an old, maybe creepypasta type thing, or?
No, because you know what? That actually does have some precedence there, Jeremiah.
Okay.
And it's a rumor, okay, or a possible rumor, but they say that Theodore Roosevelt actually set aside certain parks because he saw the Ozark Howler. And after his encounter with that particular cryptid, he started seeing other ones like Bigfoot and stuff like that. And he knew of reports of these things. So he actually set aside these national parks for cryptids.
And that's wild to think about. Man, I can't. Can you imagine actually being able to talk to that guy a few hundred years ago, just to ask him, just to be, man.
Now, you think he'd end every sentence with,
"Oh, absolutely." I'd be like, "Are you really gonna take down a Snallygaster?"
He did give a speech after he was shot. He was one tough hombre. So,
he really was. Yeah, for sure.
If anybody could take down Bigfoot or Dogman, it would have been him.
I agree 100%. Ryan, this has been just a very fun chat in a lot of places I didn't know we were going, and I'm glad we went there. Before we end out the interview, how can people keep up to date with what you're doing? Or maybe if they saw something similar to what you saw in Arizona, how can they contact you?
You can find me on Facebook under Ryan Paul Tremblay. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram under the same name. Or you can reach out to me on Monster Radio on YouTube. Just leave a comment or whatever, and I read and respond to every single comment. So reach out to me on any of those places, and I will definitely get back to you. I love interaction. I love questions. I love conversation. So just if you want to, just hit me up just to talk. I'm always game for that.
That's awesome. I'll be really keeping an eye on, hopefully, when your future books come out. We'll definitely be keeping an eye on that, and maybe even chatting at a later time.
Okay, sounds great.
All right. Thanks so much for coming on tonight, Ryan.
My pleasure, Jeremiah.